Today, Thanksgiving is painted as a warm, peaceful celebration, a symbol of gratitude, a story of unity, where pilgrims and native peoples sat side by side, sharing a meal. But the real story is older, harsher, and far more complicated. It's a story of survival, betrayal, slavery, epidemics, and an alliance that was never meant to last. To understand the origins of Thanksgiving, we must go back over 100 years before the Pilgrims ever arrived, to a time when Indigenous nations of the Northeast were already locked in dangerous, unstable relationships with European explorers. This is the true story behind Thanksgiving, the one rarely told. Long before the Mayflower crossed the Atlantic, the leaders of the Wampanoag Nation, a Sachem-led confederacy, had been trading with European explorers for over a century. The earliest encounters were cautious but cooperative. Metal tools for furs, cloth for food, knowledge exchanged for mutual benefit. But this fragile relationship soon changed. European ships returned, not just to trade, but to kidnap native men, selling them as slaves in Spain and England. These raids shattered trust and introduced devastating diseases. Smallpox, leptospirosis, and other European illnesses spread rapidly through native villages. By the early 1600s, epidemics had killed up to 90% of coastal indigenous populations. Entire Wampanoag villages were left empty. Massachusetts Bay was littered with abandoned homes and untended fields, a consequence so catastrophic that later English settlers believed the land looked prepared by God for them. But in reality, it had been cleared by disease, not divine intervention. In 1620, a religious congregation in England sought a new home to practice their faith, free from persecution. With the king's approval, they sailed for America. The Mayflower set sail on September 6, 1620, carrying 102 passengers. They arrived in a land that had already been ravaged by disease. Facing brutal weather, hunger, and lack of shelter, the Pilgrims scavenged from the environment around them. They took food and tools from empty native homes, seeds from storage pits, and in several cases, they raided graves for supplies. These actions sparked the earliest tensions, though no violence occurred yet. But the Pilgrims were unprepared. Winter killed 44 settlers by December 1620. Half the colony was dead within months. And then in March 1621, something happened that changed history. A native man walked boldly into the settlement and greeted them in English. His name was Samoset. Samoset shocked the settlers with fluent English, learned through years of dealing with European fishermen along the coast. He introduced them to another man, Tisquantum, known today as Squanto. Through Samoset, the Pilgrims expressed desire to trade, but the native Sachems, especially the Wampanoag leader Massasoit, did not trust the English. They had seen too much. Too many broken promises, too many kidnappings. So Massasoit demanded an act of good faith before any alliance could be considered. The Pilgrims sent Edward Winslow as a hostage, a living guarantee of their peaceful intentions. Massasoit accepted, and slowly an alliance began to form. On April 1st, 1621, a peace treaty was established between the Wampanoag and the settlers of New Plymouth. This treaty promised mutual defence, open trade, and peaceful conduct. With peace secured, the Wampanoag helped the Pilgrims survive. Squanto, acting as an interpreter, taught them how to plant corn, how to catch fish, how to fertilize soil, and how to navigate local territories. Without Squanto, New Plymouth might not have lasted a single year, but Squanto himself carried a tragic past, one woven deeply into the story. 7 years earlier, Squanto had been kidnapped by an English explorer and sold into slavery. He was taken across the Atlantic, eventually ending up in London. There he learned English, worked for a merchant, and adapted to the very world that had stolen him. Amazingly, the merchant arranged Squanto's return home, but when Squanto stepped onto the shores of Cape Cod, his world was gone. His entire village had been wiped out by the epidemics left behind by earlier European contact. With no family and no tribe, Squanto was taken in by Massasoit, though Massasoit never fully trusted him, and that suspicion would later prove justified. That autumn, after the Pilgrims' first successful harvest, a feast was held. This was not a planned, symbolic moment of unity, but a practical celebration of survival. The Wampanoag arrived with 90 men and brought 5 deer. The Pilgrims provided fowl, fish, and harvested crops. For 3 days there was eating, games, and diplomacy. This event, simple, temporary, and political, was later mythologized into the first Thanksgiving. But it wasn't a holiday, it wasn't a yearly tradition, and it wasn't a moment of everlasting harmony, because beneath the surface, powder kegs were forming. Squanto realized something powerful. He was the only fluent English speaker among the Wampanoag. He began to use this to his advantage. Squanto told some native villagers that he had the power to command the English, that he alone could decide peace or war. This was a dangerous lie, one that threatened Massasoit's authority. When word reached the sachem, Massasoit demanded Squanto be executed. The Pilgrims refused. They needed Squanto too much. This decision nearly shattered the alliance. Only an unexpected event prevented Squanto's immediate death. An unidentified English ship landed at Wessagusset, another colony, and its settlers began abusing the locals. Violence erupted. Wampanoag warriors planned to wipe out the entire Wessagusset settlement, but Plymouth got word of the planned attack and launched their own counter-operation to save the English colonists. This strained every relationship on the coast, yet somehow peace, fragile and uneasy, held a little longer. Though the treaty between Massasoit and Plymouth lasted from 1621 to 1660, it was the exception, not the rule. New English settlers arrived in massive numbers. They outnumbered natives within a single generation. Most newcomers held no interest in alliances, were deeply religious and saw native culture as godless, demanded conversion to Christianity, and believed the land had been divinely given to them. The Puritan worldview left no room for coexistence. Over time, pressure mounted for the Wampanoag and other tribes to surrender their land, identity, and autonomy. What began as political alliance for survival ended in cultural destruction, displacement, and eventual war. Thanksgiving as we celebrate it today was not born from unity. It was born from desperation, political necessity, and a fragile peace that could never last. The story of Thanksgiving isn't simple, it isn't cheerful, and it isn't the fairy tale many of us were taught. It's a story of a people devastated by disease, a desperate alliance, a kidnapped man caught between worlds, cultural survival, and the first cracks in a relationship that would eventually collapse into centuries of conflict. To understand Thanksgiving is to understand the cost of survival and the hidden resilience of those who endured. The holiday we celebrate today is not the one that happened in 1621, but knowing the truth honours the lives and histories of those who came before us. This is the real origin of Thanksgiving, a story not of one feast, but of everything that came before and after.